Welcome to the Restoring Our Cities podcast. We are at the end of 2020. We want to thank you for listening to season 2. We are here at our season finale, and we are just wrapping up things on and reflecting on the year, on this crazy year of 2020. So we just want to thank all of our listeners for subscribing and listening and sharing your feedback. It's been crazy to see the DMs and the messages that we've received from people all over the country. It's really, truly been inspiring to even know that you're listening. And I hope that the conversations that you hear have made a positive impact in your life and that you're meeting and connecting with people who are actually doing their part to restore their city. And I know we can't really do things on our own. It's really through the grace of God and his work through us to make an impact in our communities. And so that's what our goal is to showcase on this podcast. So we just appreciate your support. Thank you for listening. And we are going to take a couple weeks off to recharge and get back with some more new content for season 3. So we'd love to hear from you. Share your feedback. You can DM us. You can send us a voicemail on our Anchor app as well. And we'd love to hear about the future topics and any other feedback that you have for us so we can continue to improve. But we just wanted to say thank you for listening. As always, if you haven't already, please subscribe to our podcast. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the video versions are up on YouTube as well. And in this episode, we're reflecting on 2020 and just really talking about goal setting. We hope you enjoy this episode, and we look forward to connecting with you in season 3, coming soon. Welcome, everyone, to the season finale, where we vote someone off the island. No, I'm kidding. Welcome to the season finale of the Restoring Our City podcast. I can't believe that this is our 15th episode. I think it's kind of fitting because this is our 15th year of rock, and we kickstarted the season 2 of our podcast this year, and it's been awesome. It's been a blast, and I can't think of a better way to wrap this up with all of our contributors, except one. Joel's not here. But we have all of our contributors to the podcast on, and we are just going to go back through this crazy year just to reflect and just talk about some personal areas of growth and some lessons learned. And so let me just kind of go around the room with all of our special guests and collaborators. Josh Kuravilla is on. Josh, man, how's it going?
Good, man. How have you been? It's been too long. I think it's been maybe a couple months since I've been back on.
Yeah, it's been a couple episodes. Things are going good.
Yeah, things are going well. 2020 is almost done. So
sprinting towards the finish line. Well, happy to have you on, man. And Josh is from the Chicagoland area, finance guru. I don't know how you describe yourself, Josh.
I'm a certified public accountant.
Oh, okay.
CPA. So.
There you go. And I mean, I'm so glad that you're on, Josh, because you helped us kick off season 1, and to see us come all the way through season 2 as well. It's awesome to have you on. So thanks for jumping on. And speaking of season 1 contributors, the man behind the mics, Alvin Matthew, is on. Alvin, what's going on?
Hey, what's up, everyone? Not too much. Just been working and trying to catch up on the end of the year.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being on, and thanks for making us sound halfway decent. Just pick a sound intelligent if you can in post-production.
I'll turn on the smart filter.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Just happy to have you on, and thanks for all the work you do behind the scenes, Alvin. And kind of going down the line, Steve Chaco, who's helped start rock way back in the day. It's 15 years later. You've been on several episodes this season, so appreciate you being on. Steve, how's it going, man?
Good. It's been going good. Thanks for having me on this season. It's been pretty awesome. We made it, huh? 2020.
I think we made it. It's not over yet. We are recording this on December 30th, so we still have a day. So we'll see.
I don't want to say what can happen next.
I'm not going to even anticipate. But thank you for being on, man. And we appreciate your insight over several episodes. It's just awesome to reflect with you. And last but not least, we've got Toby Kurian, hailing from New York City. Toby, how is it going, man?
I'm just waiting for the aliens to come in 2021. I think that's the next thing, right? It's a natural progression of things.
Yeah, I think that's going to make sense, right? If the aliens come, no one's going to be surprised. They're like, hey, we gave you this crazy year. Now we're not going to surprise you and bombard you. But things going okay, Toby? How's it going?
Yeah, things are going great, man. Crazy year, just like everybody else's. But, it's almost over, and I'm sure on the 1st it's going to be the same thing, but at least it's a new year, right?
Yeah. Now, and speaking of crazy year, I mean, just taking a moment to reflect on the year, there's been so many news stories that's been going on since January. I don't know if you guys have seen this like Google commercial that's kind of highlighted the year and all the crazy things that's been going on. And they just kind of highlighted some things and we don't have to go through every single news story. We won't have time. But what are some of the things that jumped out at you, or what are some of the social topics that has really impacted you guys?
I feel like everything really, man, it's just crazy. Like we went through election cycle, we went through protests, we went through a global pandemic, like you name it, we went through it. So it's just been a very, very interesting year. And I don't know, hopefully we won't see this much of a, interesting year ever again, but we'll see. Like I said, aliens is probably next.
I hope you're wrong. I really hope you're wrong, Toby.
Yes, I think the world hopes Toby is wrong. I mean, I tend to agree. It's kind of hard to pick one thing out of this year that's been impacting socially wise or community wise. I know some of the stories that I was thinking about that really didn't hit big, like Australian wildfires at the beginning of the year, the killer hornets that I don't even know if they're still around. Maybe those are the aliens Toby's talking about, or
Right.
the pre-invasion.
Right. Yeah,
But,
there are some news stories that didn't hit the cycle as hard because there were just so much going on, right?
yeah, it's hard to, and plus it's, when you got protests and a global pandemic, it's like, well, what about these killer hornets? Who really cares about that, right?
Yeah, it's kind of nuts to see how wacky this year's been. Alvin, how about you, man? Like, what sticks out at you about this year?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with like Sibi, how like so much has already happened this year that we kind of even forgot about. Like, I actually forgot about the Australian wildfires, but then I remembered, oh yeah, that was the beginning of 2020, before COVID or this pandemic. But I think one of the things that kind of surprised me was if I look back at the beginning of 2020 to like all the changes and like the differences we've had just in our own lives of like stuff we do now completely differently is probably the biggest change, I think. Like I know from like a church standpoint or like a work standpoint, like everything went virtual. And in early 2020, I kind of had an idea about how some of the stuff works, and now I feel like, oh wow, I have friends with like professional cameras, like home setups, or they're like doing music and they're doing like conference calls. We're doing a podcast over Zoom, which we probably weren't thinking of doing a year ago. Maybe it's like it's kind of insane all the different things that we're getting to do. And simply because of the pandemic and because of 2020, but also like to see the way people have transitioned and made the best of that situation. I think someone said earlier that like, oh, work's closing down because no one's going into the office, but like a lot of people became more productive because they're able to get as much work done at home. And from a church standpoint, like people are like, oh, if I can't physically go into a building, how am I supposed to fellowship? How am I supposed to worship? And it's like, well, now that's like a whole like viable option is like, oh, you could literally go to church online and you could go to work online. You can have family parties and Christmas parties online. So it's definitely different, but I think there's a challenge and people rose to the challenge and like adapted and have made the best of it.
Yeah, we are living a totally different way of life, and it's hit every facet of our lives too, which is really interesting. Um, Josh, how's that impacted you just this year and what's been going on?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, there's a lot of social issues out there, but I think there's a lot of things that come from even just spawning from COVID, right? And so I think people maybe think this is less of a social issue, is maybe the economy and some of the hardships there from a stock market and economy perspective. But like if you think of like the income gap continuing to grow, right? You see, Tesla and other companies, the media puts it in a certain light, but it's basically like, oh, they've earned more money this year than like, entire generations of people. And I think it's interesting to think about how we maybe reshape the economy or rethink it and going forward, because I think a lot of these like payouts and things that are coming, the $1,200 back earlier this year that the U.S. economy, U.S. government put back out, possibly, $600 or $2,000 if Trump says, oh, give them more, and, you can argue all these things, whether they're good or bad. But I think one thing that's been proven, which I think people knew, but sometimes you got to learn the lesson the hard way, is the economy and the stock market are different things, right? And the economy is still suffering. Like there's people that don't have jobs, there's people that are struggling. And that's why a lot of these payouts and things are going out the door. But at the same time, there's a lot of money to be had, especially in tech sectors and different things like that. And you start to see some rebound, right? When you look at the total Dow Jones compared to what it was at the end of March, when it was plummeting, right? And so I don't know. I just think it's an interesting kind of piece of the whole COVID puzzle that sometimes, especially coming from my perspective, it all boils down to money, the economy, and all of that. And I think people are still struggling from a dollars perspective, as well as from social and even spiritual and things like that, moving everything virtually. Like Alvin said, it's cool to learn all the new stuff, but there's the intimacy or the connection that you kind of lose in the process and in all areas of your life.
Yeah, that's true. And I feel like, and then you guys all bring an area of expertise, which I love. And I appreciate you guys bringing that lens, even on our podcast, right? Like Josh from a financial perspective, and Alvin from a church perspective, Sibby from a law perspective, and Toby from a business and a marketing perspective. And we've had Joel contribute from a biblical perspective as a pastor. And it's just been awesome to see, our perspectives and view of life. But 2020 has really changed that, really flipped the script really for a lot of us. And, looking back then, what are some of the, I guess, the personal lessons, right? Like, is there something that you guys have taken away? And I'll just share that we posted on our Instagram. If you guys follow us at Restoring Our City on Instagram, we put up a question about like, describe 2020 in one word. And we got a ton of people who responded and said really cool things like blessing and perspective and mercy and like these positive words. But then some people shared gut-wrenching, exhausting, things like that, where you could see people are looking at this year in very different ways and their perspectives are different. So how about you guys? Like, how would you describe 2020?
I mean, dude, I could definitely talk to that. In the beginning of the year, I had a business and a full-time job, now I don't have either. It's been the craziest year for me financially. Most of my business came from, event companies and experiential marketing brands, and that totally shut down because people can't gather, so my business kind of went down the hill from there. And then as far as my job, I was still in like that realm of marketing, experiential, those kind of things. And, I had to be furloughed for a while and then I was laid off. So it's been, I'll tell you, it's been one of the toughest years of my life financially. But the other side of it is I really figured out, I think this year, how to reinvent myself, right? Also really like leaning into God and really leaning into the whole perspective of give your burden to God and let him, kind of take it over. So I really had to learn that lesson because, there's been times where my wife and I will be talking and I'm just like, babe, I don't know if, there was one time where I kind of told Jamie, like I said, I don't know if God cares. Like, I don't know if he cares about this kind of stuff. That's where I was. I was at a point where I was just like, what's going to go on? Like what, I don't know what's going to happen. We were set to, try to buy a house this year. We were, planning on Lily's first birthday party and just went out the window, and for a while, guys, I was really just like what the heck is going to go on? Like what's next for me, but then there was a night where I told Jamie this. I was like, I don't know if God cares. And then I really got convicted that night, to be completely honest. And I think people need honesty at this point, right, of the year. I really got convicted that night when I was sleeping. And, I kind of woke up in the middle of the night And God was just telling me, like, I can't believe you think that I forgot about you, or I can't believe you think that I don't care, you know? And from that night on, I really just started pressing into God. I really started going back to prayer. I started going back to the word. I started going back to saying, everything that's going on right now for me, I'm going to just give it up to you, because that's ultimately what, Christianity is, right? Giving up your burden to God to let him sort it out for you. And I'll tell you guys, after that, and after that night, and after, a couple of weeks, things started opening up for me, and I'm not there yet. I know, Joby, you and I talk offline all the time about, my interviews coming up, and what's going on with that whole thing. And, it's still really hard because, I still had to sell all my equipment. Like today, right before I came on the podcast, I sold one of my machines because I can't use it anymore. This morning I had my final round of interviews for a job I really want, but I don't know if I'm going to get it. It's just still up in there. But there's this peace over me right now that's saying, like, if this is not the door, I will make sure the right door opens for you. And I'm kind of like living on that faith right now. So that's basically my big takeaway from, this year.
No, that's huge. Like that just reminds me of the year, right? Like kind of like Alvin was saying, it makes you forget all the events throughout the year, make you forget about what you kind of been through throughout the year, like some of the events in your life. And we deprioritize some of the events that even God takes us to, right? And that's actually been something that God's been talking about in terms of prioritizing him or prioritizing the word, kind of like you mentioned. And I had an opportunity to do that. In some ways, I've had a period of rest because I've just been grinding so much at work on a daily basis. And we still have to do it just via Zoom. And, in my line of work, you're going to court every day and then you're going to the office. You're constantly doing something. And it's never a bad thing to be busy in that sense, which is definitely a blessing, but it takes away from what I want to do. And that, or made me take away from spending time with God. It made me take a time away from spending time with my family. And things like this this year has allowed me to prioritize my family and prioritize God and prioritize reading the word and seeing, like, just when you were talking to, I was just been reminded of some things that God has been talking about in my life personally, about like you sense the waters like rising so quickly and like overrushing like your faith or overrushing like your sense of like where you're at, your identity, very quickly. And I think the enemy does that for a reason, right? And it makes you feel like you're alone, that you don't know where to go or what you're doing. But like God's like, perspective's huge, right? Like take a step back and you realize like those waters were risen not for you, they're risen for your enemy, so to speak. Like the Israelites walking through the Red Sea, that water rose, and it's like, that was never intended to fall back on them. That was never intended to overwhelm them. That was never intended to harm them. That was intended to make a space and a way, like dry ground for these guys. And oftentimes we see these waters and we're like, what the heck is going on? And like, God's like, take a step back. Like, I got this. Like, he's actually making like dry ground. If you just look down and it's like, it's a pathway, it's an opening, it's a door. And like just prioritizing God this year has allowed me to see, I guess, perspective wise, right? Like not just prioritizing, but seeing God's hand and perspective over some of these things that like we just may feel like is not meant for us, but God has a purpose for it. Like God has a reason for that.
Yeah, I like what you're talking about with like prioritization. I think that's something that I've definitely been feeling this year, is just kind of a reprioritization, right? Like, you kind of talked about it. It's like you have 24 hours in a day and you've slotted something in every time slot and you're never going to get more time, right? You got to take something out to put something in, right? And I think looking at the positive side, the commute comes out, the meetings come out, the travel come out. I traveled once a month, on average. I was up in Milwaukee at different clients and, in New York and kind of in different places. And so all that comes out, like, what do you do with it? Do you sleep more or, do you do something? And so that's where I think I joined a small group for a period and like just started to do things that I know are important, kind of like you were saying, Steve, and just, always said, oh, I just don't have time, or I don't have time. And So, I think it's just changing life to adapt to what's going on in the world. And like, one of the big things we did is, yeah, I know a lot of you guys, like, I'm Chicago first, and Chicago meaning like the city of Chicago, but I moved out to the suburbs, right? Because Chicago wasn't working the way that I wanted it to, right? And I needed it to for my life. And so I needed more space. I needed work from home. And so I was kind of proud of myself for, letting the world shift around me, but kind of keeping my priorities the same, meaning, the world's changed. So I changed, right? And adapted to it. And so, there's plenty of areas where I haven't done that, but I think that was one where I was proud of myself for, bringing up the conversation. Let's shift, right? And putting God first, I think, is another one that's been, what's jumping out to me personally of, hey, there's a Bible right here when I'm working here all day. It's not like I'm in the office. It's like, you can't find 5, 10, 15 minutes of time, or, half an hour a week, or, something like that to commit to spending time with God. And, it's something I still work on and still struggle through, because I think there's more than just the time barrier sometimes. But I think that's that prioritization that really, really stuck out to me this year of like, yeah, you're not going to get more time, but luckily we kind of have been able to get some time slots back in our schedule. And, how are you going to use it? I think it's an interesting way to think about it. But I've also thought about just reducing the amount of work I'm doing, right? It's like, what am I getting the most out of in life? And I'm trying to rebalance that, I think, is the term that I use with a lot of people.
If you had to like pick one specific lesson that you learned, if you had to boil it down to one thing, what would it be?
Patience and faith is very good. Also, like my circumstance, just because of the way I like my job and my occupation, it hasn't been affected in a negative way in so much as, well, no, I shouldn't say a negative way. It's negative, but not in a negative way of where it's like hurt financially. Actually, it's been better financially, but like worse on my actual life because I'm like too busy and I'm like overworking. But just kind of trusting that like we can't really put our trust or our faith in anything. And I think like especially 2020's like really showed us that like literally everything we thought was like unsinkable was like sunk this year. And just kind of reevaluating like what's actually important in life, what we should actually care about, and what the true important things are, and just kind of valuing that and just being intentional about like preserving those things. Like I had to make sure I was reaching out to friends and family I didn't see because I wasn't traveling as often, so I didn't have like the excuse to be like, oh, I'll swing by sometime. That it's like, no, I literally have to I have to call you because I'm not actually going to physically see you, or we got to set up a Zoom call. We got to, do like some kind of video chat or something so that, we can kind of keep connected. Yeah. Being intentional about what, like building relationships and being present for what's important.
Yeah, I think, and I'll say this because we started this podcast a couple of years ago. Actually, we did season 1 a couple of years ago, and some of the inspiration to kick off season 2 was because of what was happening in the world, right? Like because of these news stories. And I think specifically with like social justice, and some of us had some conversations. And it's interesting, right? Because like Toby, you're in New York, Sibby, you're in Detroit, and Josh, you moved to the suburbs when you were just a couple train stops away from me. And Alvin, you live in the suburbs, and I'm in the city in Chicago. We're all over the place. But one of the beauties of like Zoom and technology is now we all get to be together and talk about positive things and connect with our community. And I feel like that's been such an eye-opening thing about this year. And so it's been one of the highlights for me, right? Even though we've talked about some really serious issues, personally, I think this has been so great to connect with you guys. Selfishly, I would say I love our listeners. I don't know all of you, but like this has been awesome to get to connect with my guys and my friends, and to talk about positive things and be the leaders who we are meant to be. So maybe shift gears a little bit. What's your favorite thing about the podcast this year?
And you just said it.
Yeah, seriously.
All right,
Just
well,
being able to
that's
like,
Yeah.
just being able to like talk to you guys and like be able to have like real conversations, right? Like this is basically what we would do if we were all together hanging out in Chicago for a night. we'd all just be talking about the same stuff and this is just being broadcasted. So it is a little, I think, initially nerve-wracking, but at the same time, we all just committed to just having like honest conversations, like we just did today, right? Like just kind of like having open, unfiltered conversations, and that really connects our community, or that's at least the goal or the hope, right? Just kind of jumping back a little bit, but like that's kind of my perspective too of this year. Like that's exactly it. Like having accountability and like being able to just connect with one another from like a human perspective. Like we all don't have it together. Like not everything is going to be looking picture perfect all the time. I feel like Instagrammers or like influencers who like couldn't go travel had to post from home, not like driving out of Nashville or something, or like
from their parents' basement.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's just, I think it brought out a side that people don't necessarily always show. People were in PJs, just like the real side of people. I thought was kind of cool to see, but that's what we would do.
Like being vulnerable, right? Like, which is, I think, a trait that we all should have regardless of a pandemic or not, right?
Yeah. Vulnerability. That's a good way to sum it up. Yeah.
I think, Joby, I haven't been on as many of these this year, but I mean, the fact that it's happening, right? The podcast is happening. And I mean, I just think about the first year where we felt like you all got to be in the same place, and we have to have the perfect microphone set up, and Alvin's got to be sitting down on the floor with the mixer, and Jason's going to help. And, we got to get food. And we had this like framework of how the podcasts or events for rock or whatever should work and look. And I think that's one really beneficial thing that's come out of 2020. 2020 is kind of like smacked you in the face and been like, oh, you want to have events? No. And it's like, but you could do podcasts. You can virtually connect. You can maybe connect more in ways than you could previously, right? I don't think anybody was using Zoom consistently other than maybe for a work perspective until about March. Going back to the economy, their stock price probably shows it,
Oh, yeah.
tripling, doubling, whatever it was over the period of time. But the reality is just consistency, right? I think that's something we always struggled with. That's something I struggle with personally, right? Discipline, consistency. But to see the podcast come out and see the number of guys involved in it, and that's helped us to gain consistency as a group. It's awesome. And especially watching, a lot of these podcasts or listening to a lot of them not being on them, it's just encouraging that, hey, we're going to keep going with this thing. And, you don't need the perfect circumstances or the perfect setup. You can adapt and grow. It's just more going back to prioritization. It's like, are you going to make it, a priority? Like Joby gets on us, I think, if we don't set aside Sunday nights for recording. And, again, I've been watching the Slack messages and things from a distance, but I think that's what it is, right? It's, you got to adapt, you got to grow, you got to change. And I'm proud of this group for doing that, right? And being consistent in the process.
Hey, I want to be vulnerable, but I don't want to be that vulnerable. So don't paint this negative picture of me on the podcast.
Oh, you're the worst person that I've ever met. I've never met anybody as bad as Joby. I think anybody that knows him can attest to that. No, I'm kidding.
Unfiltered conversations.
He's amazing. Yeah.
No, I think back, there's a picture. I'll probably post it on Instagram with all of your permissions, but there's literally a picture of us for season 1 sitting in my old apartment.
I don't give you permission.
Okay. So I'm going to Photoshop your face, but now everybody knows who it is. And it's literally like Alvin on the floor with the mixer and me and Josh on the couch. And, I like what you said, Josh. Like, we don't have to have the perfect setup. Sometimes we try to perfect our situation, whether it's work, school, church, whatever it is. And we have this plan going into it. And I think about that. There's this Batman and Robin meme where it's like Batman slapping Robin. It's like you come up to 2020 with your plans, bam, think again, right? I feel like that's what this year did to us, but adapt. I feel like that's a key word for the year.
Yeah. And I think even like biblically, right, I'd give a message as like a high school kid, probably not appreciating how much it would mean to be in the long term of things, but I titled it The Pursuit of Perfection, right? And like, that's kind of what Christianity is, right? We're pursuing the model of Jesus Christ, but we're never going to be Jesus Christ. We're never going to achieve that. And, the odds are that we won't ever even come, anywhere close to that. but that doesn't mean we shouldn't progress in that direction. So it's kind of like, even with the podcast or anything, it's like, let's just do what we can do now and then take one step forward, versus like, trying to get 10 steps forward in the background and not do it,
Yeah, I think for me it's just spending time with you guys, I mean, listen, I moved to another city when I was 34 years old. I mean, there's not many ways to, gain deep relationships at that point. Yes, I have friends here, great guys, great people around, but guys like you are different because we have such a, we have history. We known each other since we were in our teens, and a lot of people here known each other since they were in their teens. So there's odd times where I'll be hanging out with some people and they have their stories and I'm not part of it at all, and those stories could go on for hours, and which is normal, right? That's what we do too. But to be able to come back and connect with you guys, even if it's 1 hour on Sundays, has really helped me find perspective and kind of grounded me. And I look forward to it, every week, to just to hang out and talk about random things. And then because those relationships still there, we talk offline much more often too.
But looking forward, right? Like, what do we want to take into the next year? What do you guys want to talk about, or what do you look forward to in the next upcoming year?
I think even like, you mean just topic wise, right? Like even on the podcast, that one of the big things I feel like, especially around this time of the year or this season, is like depression, right? Like people that are just feeling alone, or like people that have lost people throughout this past year that have to start a whole new year or a different season in their life and adapt to that, right? Like I think I've seen a lot of people come into that season in their life where they've lost people or like have just been isolated in a lot of ways, and kind of what you're referring to, Toby, in terms of even being around people that really don't, or you haven't grown up with, and them having lives kind of predating your involvement. It's easy to become isolated. It's easy to become depressed in a season like December or January, right? And then February's coming up, or the next holiday. But I think that's like,
when you don't see your family either, right?
Yeah, exactly. Especially with COVID being on top of that, right? It just on top of the season, on top of losing people, it's like COVID isolates us already. If we're all not having a vaccine in the next like 2-3 months, like what's it going to look like? I really don't want to know. I mean, if we're isolated and like aliens come down into our homes, like at the same
aliens,
time.
man.
Oh, man.
Aliens.
Dude,
Why are you guys so
Toby
hyped
is
up
right.
on the aliens?
I don't know. I feel like Toby recently watched Independence Day.
And I've been watching a lot of Joe Rogan lately, since,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of alien talks, guys.
Oh man, season 3. Here's a preview of season 3.
Well, yeah,
You guys
aliens.
see those structures that came on in the desert, right?
The monolith.
Oh, the monolith. Oh, God.
Oh,
I'm
you're
showed
talking
up
about
in
the,
that's a
Michigan.
marketing scheme, but
That's got to be a marketing scheme.
Yeah.
That has
Yeah.
to be.
Wait, explain this. I think I saw a headline, but I did not read the article because
so
I thought it
there's
was
been
clickbait.
these structures that have been popping up in like random deserts. Like one was in Utah, I think, right? And then like randomly like across like the world, somewhere in Europe, and it happened again somewhere else. And people really still haven't figured out where it came from. And of course, the number one theory is aliens.
Got it.
Going with like the whole Space Force now, and just like, there's a lot of it. And it's so funny because Jamie's going to hear this podcast and just roast me, because she tells me all the time, she's like, you're obsessed with this alien stuff.
We are not condoning this, Jamie, if you're listening.
Right.
But I will say, if there is an expert on these monoliths and you would like to be on this podcast, this is an open invitation. Toby will interview you.
you guys think the aliens listen to our podcast?
They're creating
Yeah, definitely.
They produce.
just to send us a DM.
Yeah, for sure.
They
Comes
produce.
in the DMs.
Joby, if you get an
Alien.
Instagram DM that is from the aliens, you better send that to us.
What else about the next year? What are you guys looking forward to? What are you hoping to accomplish? And maybe this is just another way of asking you about goals and like setting goals to accomplish in the next year.
I kind of want to keep going with what I'm doing now. You know,
I thought you meant
aliens, not the aliens part.
I need to pursue aliens further.
This is no.
Where is this going?
Guys, I love aliens. All the aliens. Aliens are my favorite. I'm an alien.
You know what's
no, but it's
yes. And Toby, go ahead. What are you looking forward
no.
to?
In all honesty, but I really think that for me, I feel like I've rediscovered my faith this year, and I really want to keep going with that. I really want to press into God, and I really want to make sure that wherever I land, you know, where if I find a job tomorrow or my, you know, my business starts up again or whatever it is, that I don't forget all the lessons that I learned this year, and that I continue to just press into the Word and just press into God and just really, you know, have faith that things will always work out if you have, you know, if you're trying to follow the path that God has set for you. So that's my goal for next year.
Yeah, I think even for myself, just kind of like what I'm looking forward to in 2021 is kind of like what Toby said, like just going on with like what I'm doing now and just trying to improve, whether that's at work, whether that's in my spiritual life or whatever it is, and any like side projects or anything I have. I just want to kind of like see it grow. You know what I mean? Especially dealing with all the conflicts and the challenges that we had for, 2020. I just want to see basically improvement, you know, and hope, and like keeping hope alive in the sense of how we did before 2020 or the pandemic. Like, I want to get a lot of stuff done. Hopefully things open up. Hopefully we're getting past a lot of the pandemic or the, you know, sickness or whatever else is kind of looming out there, and we kind of get to sort of our regular normal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I have like kind of two things. I think a lot of the social issues and the political climate of this past year has got me thinking more about like understanding different perspectives and different people. And so I've been, you know, like trying to understand the roots of things like policing in America, or, you know, I have strong feelings maybe on politics or a particular position, but other people have like the equal and opposite strong feeling. And so I think 2021 is going to be, at least for me, a year of like understanding. I want to hear like people's stories and perspectives. I think we so often just fight or pin up everybody's views against each other versus understanding where that perspective comes from. And without that understanding, I don't know that you can really change someone's perspective or even add value via a conversation. And I think that's something that's really been on my heart recently, is just that understanding element. And then I'd say the second piece is maybe something a little bit like different, is I don't know that we're ever going to get back to pre-COVID normal, right? And so I'm really interested to see what the new normal is and try to adapt to it maybe quicker than the average person, just because I think it will do me justice, like spiritually, socially, and all those different ways. And I don't think anybody's making an argument that social connection on a one-to-one basis in person isn't the best type, but I think there's going to be modified work schedules. There's going to be different outlooks for 2021. I'm interested how commercial real estate works and all that stuff. But I think, thinking about what that new normal can be, and not in a way that it's worse than the old, but it's a modified and better way of, people don't have commute times, or people don't have this, and how do we get people's lives and things looking more efficient? So I'm really excited to see what that new normal is for myself and find that out for myself, but also see what kind of the world and the country thinks of it. But
yeah, I think particularly for me, it's kind of what Josh was talking about. It's just engaging people on a real level. I guess that Instagram level where it's filtered and goes through this element or this frame of mind that needs to be politically correct. It's more so just real talk, and just being able to engage with people that are opposite of me or having beliefs that aren't necessarily the same, but being able to just be able to talk to them, just being able to just open up and be honest about where we're all at. Because it's fine if we're not all agreeing, right? And just being able to disagree this year, maybe. maybe that's where I want to be.
That's awesome. And I think those should be tangible things. And we could do a whole episode on goal setting and SMART goals and defining them. But I would challenge all of you guys to like, let's hold each other accountable, and even our listeners, right? Like, okay, 2020 is a wrap. Let's not even think about it, whether it was negative or positive. We have a brand new year in front of us. And I know it's kind of cheesy to talk about New Year's resolutions, but have you ever made your goals public, right? Does somebody know about your goals? And like everything that we just said it on a podcast that I'm going to hit publish on, right? And we can listen back. And if you guys really want to do some digging, listen to season 1. We did an episode like this at the end of the year in 2017. So if you want to dig into that, it's not as polished. I don't think we're polished now, but like, man, it's crazy to think about what we talked about in that episode. And now it's 2020. And I think it's really powerful to have your goals in public view, right? Like me and my wife made a goal last year. We made personal goals, and I had a goal to read 10 books this year. I totally failed. But I read a lot more than I did this year than I did in years past. And so I kind of want I'll just say it right now. Like my goal, I read this article in Chicago Tribune where they just posted like the 100 best albums of the 21st century, right? And I'm like, man, this is kind of crazy. I haven't heard a lot of these albums. What if I like tried to culture myself and inform myself better by reading 10 books, maybe listening to 10 albums? I want to connect with 10 new people. And, you know, I think we all as a team with this podcast have goals for this podcast to like connect more and get engaged with our community more. And so hold me to it at the end of the year next year. But I would encourage even our listeners, if you have something you want to do next year, I think this podcast is evidence of it. Like we just threw something to the wall to see what sticks, and it's kind of sticking. There are times when Toby talks about aliens that I feel like that goal is sliding off the wall slowly, but honestly, this has been a blast this year. And I know there's plenty of other people. I mean, to all of our guests, thank you so much. I know we have some really great guests lined up to connect with next year, but I really hope you guys make your goals public. Let us know about your goals too. Comment in our Instagram post or Facebook post or wherever, and share it with other folks and share it with the people around you to hold you accountable. But I think if we could set our aim really high for next year, even if we don't hit it, at least what's the cheesy saying? If you aim for the stars,
you hit the moon.
Aliens will come.
Yes. I shouldn't have went there.
Why did you go with the space theme?
Why did I?
There were others.
നമ്മുടെ പ്രിയപ്പെട്ട aliens വന്നു.
How would that even look like, guys? I mean, are we going to be wishing that we were back in 2020 if the aliens come in 2020?
Oh gosh.
You got you guys thinking, huh?
Hey Joby, just so you know, I prefer to keep my goals private so that if I fail, no one knows.
Excellent.
It's very helpful.
That's another methodology. I mean, like, let's expand our horizons. I hope it challenges us. I'll be honest. You know, one thing I really hate is self-promotion. You know, just to tell you a concept, I hate self-promotion. But now,
make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Follow our Instagram and Facebook. And
there you go. I have to say that every week. You guys are making me say that every week. Hit the bell. I didn't even know what the bell was. That's how old I am. Like, hit the bell.
Smash that like button. Hit that bell. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and somewhere else.
Pretty good.
Text me directly.
Good, yeah.
I'm just gonna cut that, put that on loop, stick that at the end of everything. Yeah, like I think we have to go outside our comfort zones, but guys, there's nobody else I'd rather do this with. I mean, I know Joel's not on this podcast. I do want to say thank you to all of you, to Toby, Josh, Steve, Alvin. Jason's producing this podcast behind the scenes. Joel, to all of our guests. We made a running joke that in the season finale, somebody was going to get killed off. And apparently Joel's internet wasn't working, so he is the lucky one off the island.
I called Comcast and told them to cut his Wi-Fi.
And we knew there's somebody working behind the scenes. But guys, I want to thank you so much for just contributing to the podcast, connecting with our guests and our audience, and just sharing. It's not one person doing this. It's literally a team, and we all kind of collaborate on ideas. And I know we're kind of joking around, but there's been a lot of serious content that we've shared over this past season, and we've heard a lot of great feedback. And I know it's been an encouragement, right? And I know we're a little candid. This is our style. This is how we are. But at the end of the day, we all care about our communities. And that's kind of why we're doing this. Otherwise, we can keep these conversations private and we could just talk amongst ourselves. But we want to spark conversations that impact our community and really hopefully promote restoring our cities, right? Into the areas that it's broken. And so we hope that we continue that legacy into season 3. So guys, thank you so much. Looking forward to all the new great things that are happening in season 3. And we look forward to connecting with all of our listeners out there as well. So happy New Year to everyone. Enjoy your New Year's, and we will talk to you in a few weeks.
Aliens.
That's them. That's our next guest.
They found us.
They found us. Thanks for listening to the Restoring Our City podcast. As always, please continue to follow us. We will be back on season 3 in a few weeks. We look forward to bringing you some new content and some great guests. And please share your feedback. We'd love to hear from you. You can leave a review on Apple Podcasts. That really helps us out as well. But continue to follow us on social media. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Restoring Our City, as well as on Twitter at The Rock Podcast. And you can find all that information on our website at restoringourcity.org. Thanks again. Happy New Year. And we look forward to connecting with you in season 3.